Last video we were talking about what Gemini Studio people thought about communists. What is communism? They did not have a proper idea, but they had a very bad idea. And that idea probably is also generated by the government at that time because they were totally anti-communist. They didn't understand what the communist people were all about. Okay, let's go back to page number 62 in your textbook. Okay, and here it is. Okay, so the communist was a godless man. That's what they thought. Okay, he had no filial or conjugal love. No filial or conjugal love means this word filial refers to love between parent and child, love between brother and sister, brother and brother, sister and brother, all kinds of and love between cousins and all those things. Uh, all these things are referred to as filial love, love that is connected to relationship. Okay, not relationships, but relations or conjugal love. They did not also have any favor. They did not like also love between man and woman or any kind of marital love. Okay, he had no compunction about killing his own parents. Now he was such a kind of character, according to the Gemini Studio people, that he did not hesitate, no compunction, no hesitation about killing his own parents or killing his own children. He was always out to cause and spread unrest. The only thing that he wanted to do was to spread unrest and violence among innocent and ignorant people. So that's what he always tried to do. He wanted to create violence among innocent and ignorant people, which means he's an antisocial element. The communist was an antisocial element to the Gandhiite or the Qadiite. Such notions, such ideas, which prevailed everywhere else in South India. It's not just among the Qadiites and the Gandhiites. Among the general population of South India at that time, this was the idea of what a communist was. Okay, else in South India at that time also naturally floated about vaguely. Now this idea also floated about or continued to exist, was vaguely in the background among the khadi clad poets of Gemini Studios. So it's therefore Gemini Studios was a reflection of what life was, right? Evidence of it was soon forthcoming. Now the proof that they didn't understand what communism was all about soon came. Now when did it come? If you look a little later, when Frank Buchanan is, I think, the name of one of the presidents of America. Now, he had a policy of moral rearmament. He found that Western society was becoming immoral. It was becoming very corrupt. So he wanted to, he created a program to rebuild the moral quality of life in America. Okay. So Frank Buchanan's Moral Rearmament Army arrived in Chennai. When Frank Buchanan's Moral Rearmament Army, if you look at the word rearmament army, you have two words. Rearmament means to arm again, to bring into force again. To bring what into force again? Moral science. Moral Rearmament Army. Army is the team. Okay, some 200 strong. Now this army was around 200 in number. It's a big team. Visited Madras sometime in 1952. They could not have found a warmer host in India than the Gemini Studios. When they came into India and to Gemini Studio and to Chennai, or Madras as it was called at that time, they found a very warm host in Gemini Studios. That means Gemini Studios welcomed them. They're welcoming everything that was new. Someone called the group an international circus. But if you actually see the criticism that existed at that time, it was called an international circus. They weren't very good at the trapeze. If you want to think of the concept of a circus, you may think that these 200 people were very good at the trapeze, which is that swing-like thing that they have in a circus where what do you call um, people were swinging up and down. No, gymnasts were swinging up and down um, on the on something that they hang. You might have seen it in circuses, and that's called the trapeze. Not these people were not very good at the trapeze, and their acquaintance with animals, their familiarity with animals. Why is there suddenly a reference to animals? A zoo is something, okay? A circus is something that contains animals which perform. So, if you think that they were familiar with animals, their acquaintance with animals was only at the dinner table. They did have a relationship with animals, and that relationship was only at the dinner table. But they presented, even in spite of that, they presented two pieces of drama in a most professional manner. The way of conducting the drama was very exceptional, and that exceptional drama presentation skills was something that the Gemini studios immediately took to, right? Their Jotham Valley, they had a play called as Jotham Valley, who the moral rearmamentami, their Jotham Valley, and The Forgotten Factor, another play called as The Forgotten Factor. These two plays, when it ran in Gemini Studios, ran several shows in Madras. And I think probably they used Gemini Studios not only as a place to stage their plays, right? They also used it as a place of rest, or let's say place where they come back to and where they lived. Okay, now they went throughout Madras staging shows, and and these shows kept on running for many seasons, or sorry, many times. Okay, ran several shows in Madras, and along with the other citizens of the city, the Gemini family, a 600 of 600. Now, the people who are in Gemini were in Gemini Studios in 1952 were 600 in number. Now, all of them saw the plays over and over again. The message of the plays was usually plain and simple homilies, which is usual even in Gemini Studios. Whatever they produce, the movies that they produce were plain and simple homilies. Homilies are small stories, like moral science stories, that we use for messages, to give useful messages to children. So they were usually like that. But sets and costumes were first rate. They were not attracted by the moral rearmament that these homilies were supposed to deliver. But what they were impressed by was the sets and costumes, because they were exceptional. Madras and the Tamil drama community were terribly impressed, and what else? There's a bit of lag here. I'm just waiting for the lag to get over, and then I will be able to handle the next slide. Okay, I think that should have brought it up. Yes, it's brought it up. Let's go back to the screen. Okay, and for some years, almost all Tamil plays had a scene of sunrise and sunset in the manner of Jotham Valley, and a bare stage. Okay, so the influence came into Tamil theater as well as Tamil movies, right? What did they do? They did some of the things that was shown on stage, which was, how did they show sunrise on stage? Uh, well, not just sunrise and sunset, because they look similar. They're supposed to look similar, right? In the manner of Jotham Valley. They did it in the same way as Jotham Valley. And how was that shown? An empty stage, a bare stage with no actors in it, a white background. So there was the backdrop, which was probably white, white background curtain, and a tune played on the flute, which this tune is supposed to be evocative of either the beginning of day, which is dawn, or the setting of the sun, the dusk. Okay, so this was introduced into the movies and theater of Chennai. It was some years later that I learned that MRA was a kind of counter movement to international communism. Only much later, he himself, Ashokamitran himself, came to know that this movement moral rearmament was exactly opposite, okay, counter to communism, international communism, counter movement to international communism. And the big bosses of Madras, like Mr. S.S. Vasan, simply played into their hands. That means without knowing, they encouraged anti-communism. I am not sure, however, that this was indeed the case for the unchangeable aspects. Now, Ashoka Mitran says probably they were not bothered either way, whether it was communism or not communism, because there was something unchangeable about doing their business. It was a business. Okay, for the unchangeable aspects of these big bosses and their enterprises remained the same: MRA or communism or no MRA, international communism or no international communism. So they still would have thought about what is more profitable, what will generate more profit. Only those things they were bothered about. They were not really concerned about communism or, uh, let's say, MRA, right? The staff of the Gemini Studios had a nice time hosting 200 people of all hues and sizes, at least 20 nationalities. Okay, so when the MRA were there, they enjoyed the time. How did they enjoy? There were 200 people, and these 200 people, just like in the Gemini Studios, was a mixture of people. There were people from all over the world in it. Okay, it was such a change. 200 people of all hues and sizes, at least 20 nations was represented in the MRI team. It was such a change from the usual collection of crowd players. So the look that they gave was much different from the usual crowd of crowd players who were selected to be similar. Crowd players or crowd actors who are in the background, they are selected in such a way that they look like the common people. They're not extraordinary, and they're being given makeup also that makes them look more ordinary. Now that is a really boring thing compared to all these people waiting to be okay. And it was such a change from the usual collection of crowd players waiting to be slapped with thick layers of makeup by the office boy in the makeup department. A few months later, the telephone lines of the big bosses of Madras buzzed once again, and we at Gemini Studios cleared a whole shooting stage to welcome another visitor. All they said was that he was a poet from England. The only poets from England that the simple Gemini staff knew of or heard of were Wordsworth and Tennyson. These are the famous people that India came to know, okay, among the poets. The more literate, the people who had studied a little more, came to a higher class, did a degree or something like that. The more literate ones knew Keats, Shelley, and Byron, the next layer of poets who were, obscure to the common people. And one or two might have faintly come to know of someone by the name of Eliot, T.S. Eliot. I think he's talking about, which is supposed to be only the most erudite people who came to know about T.S. Eliot. Who was the poet visiting Gemini Studios now? He is not a poet, he is an editor. That's why the boss is giving him a big reception. Okay, says one voice in the crowd of 600 people, which formed the Gemini Studios. Vasan was also the editor of the popular Tamil weekly Ananda Vigadan. Okay, you must have heard about Ananda Vigadan, no? It still is there in publication. Now, probably it was because Ananda Vigadan's editor was the boss of Gemini Studios. So he was welcoming the boss of another magazine, okay, similar magazine. Gemini Studios did not really, bother about other things like, let's say, what movement is important, what is, let's say, trending and all those things. Nothing like that. They only bothered about how to do the business best. Okay. So probably they'll be more similar to those people who catch information from the media these days, that which is trending news, and pass it on. They don't really care about whether they believe in the philosophy that they are proposing or not. Okay, now let's continue with the next slide. The next slide, which is covers uh, page number 63 and 64, we have a few more details. So what was there in the last slide? He was not a poet. He is an editor. That's why the boss is giving him a big reception. Vasan was also the editor of the popular Tamil weekly Ananda Vikatan. Last paragraph. Okay, this is in page number 63. If you go to the next paragraph, and that's what you see on the slide, he wasn't the editor. Okay, he wasn't the editor of any of the known names of British publications in Madras. Okay, that is those known at the Gemini Studios. He wasn't the editor of the known names. What do they know of the British publications in Madras? Very few magazines, very few newspapers. Okay, he was not the editor of any of those. Since the top men of the Hindu, which was a noted newspaper even at that time, were taking the initiative. So since it's a daily, the Hindu is a daily, which is there throughout India, which mainly is seen in South India. Were taking the initiative. The boss of the Hindu, which is a daily newspaper, was taking the step in order to encourage or bring in this man, the surmise, the let's say, what do you call surmises? Let's say, what it means was that the poet was the editor of a daily, just like the Hindu, but not from the Manchester Guardian, which was a daily, or the London Times, another daily. So it's not the famous dailies, maybe it's an obscure daily. That's the guess that they were making. That was all that even the most well-informed among us knew. At last, around 4 in the afternoon, the poet or the editor arrived. Okay, it was already evening. He was a tall man, very English. He doesn't seem to have anything in common with the Indians. Extremely tall, looking very much like a British man, probably a gentleman, British gentleman. Very serious, hardly smiled probably, and of course very unknown to all of us. Very unknown to everybody. Nobody knew about him. Battling with half a dozen pedestal fans on the shooting stage, the boss read out a long speech. So he laid, the boss laid his paper, the thing that he was reading from on top of the podium and tried to read. And there was a lot of pedestal fans all around. These pedestal fans flipped the pages, right? So he forced himself to keep it steady, which means there was a lot of break while he was reading it out. While he was doing that, he, brought to attention some introductory words about him, right? What did he say? The boss read out a long speech. Nobody understood what this speech was all about, because nobody understood. It was obvious that he too knew precious little about the poet. Probably it's a speech written by somebody in the, let's say, probably Ashok Mitra and somebody else who does the writing for the boss. It looked like the boss himself was not very clear who this was. Okay, about, or the editor. We do not know whether he's a poet or the editor, the man who was being introduced. The speech was all in the most general terms, but here and there it was peppered with words like freedom and democracy. Then the poet spoke. Now, when the poet spoke, nobody understood who this man was. No proper introduction. So they were totally in the dark. Now, added to that, he couldn't have addressed a more dazed and silent audience. Everybody was very, in a state of shock, daze, and they were totally silent. No one knew what he was talking about, and his accent, it was a British accent, defeated all attempt to understand. They tried to catch the words, but the words were in an accent that they could not decipher and what he was saying. They defeated any attempt to understand what he was saying. The whole thing lasted about an hour. Now, if you see the scene that is being depicted here, you'd be laughing. Then the poet left, and we all dispersed in utter bafflement. We were looking very puzzled. It's all just a waste of time. What are we doing? We asked ourselves. What is an English poet doing in a film studio which makes Tamil films for the simplest sort of people? What is a British man doing there? People whose lives least afforded them with the possibility of cultivating a taste for English poetry. Now, that is to be understood a little better. Now, if you look at what he's trying to say, you see that these people, were not able to, um, what do you call, associate or connect with a person whose life was very different from their lives. Their lives was very simple and had very simple, what do you call, goals. Therefore, they didn't really understand what was being told. Okay, people whose lives afforded the possibility of cultivating a taste for, so they were poverty stricken, so they couldn't, if you see Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you won't be really looking at, let's say, poetry and trying to appreciate poetry when you are not having sufficient for your daily needs. You do not know when the salary would come and whether it will be sufficient, uh, who will come asking for the money that you have borrowed. These are the things that they'll be bothered about. Poetry, they won't have time for, right? People whose lives least afforded them the possibility of cultivating a taste for English poetry. The poet looked pretty baffled too. Even the poet looked very confused. For he too must have felt the sheer incongruity of his talk about the thrills and travails of an English poet. He must have felt how stupid and how, out of their depth these people will be when you talk about the problems of British aristocracy writing poetry, right? Right. Okay, so he must have looked very confused. His visit remained an unexplained mystery. Now, why he visited, therefore, became a mystery from that moment on. And for years, it continued a mystery. But for him, some light came into his life. Let's see what that is in the next slide. Okay, this is what it says. The great prose writers of the world may not admit it. Now, even when reading this piece of literature, which is in prose, it's quite difficult to follow. Not because the language is difficult, but it's a little challenging for those who are not used to sitting and listening carefully. Oh, sorry, sitting and reading carefully. Okay, they want something. These days it's much more prevalent that you can only give something that is very short, a story that is very short, a video that is very short. Only then people will pay attention. But if you have prose writers writing their 700 800 pieces of pages of writing, nobody is going to um, read or listen when they speak. So here is this. The great prose writers of the world may not admit it, but my conviction grows stronger day after day that prose writing is not and cannot be the true pursuit of a genius. So, in the end, the prose writers begin to wonder whether what they're doing is something very brainy. Probably people are not interested because they are really stupid. These writers are really stupid. So that conviction starts growing the more people don't read what you write. It is for the patient. Now, prose writing is for the patient, those people, those writers who have a lot of patience and also are persistent, will not give up, persevering drudge, who continue to keep working, persevering in their drudgery, their boring and long task, with a heart so shrunken, with a heart so made small that nothing can break it. Rejection slips, the heart becomes so used to taking beating of rejection that nothing can break it. Rejection slips. That is, when their stories or their prose write-ups come back to them as rejected, it doesn't mean a thing to him. He at once sets about making a fresh copy of the long prose piece and sends it on to another editor, enclosing postage for the return of the manuscript. So this is the pattern that they followed if they were rejected. They wrote another piece, sent it to another editor, and hoped for the best. Okay, and they probably don't want their long pieces of writing to end up in the dustbin, so they send money for the manuscript to be sent back. It was for such people that the Hindu had published a tiny announcement in an insignificant corner of an unimportant page. Okay, so those people, got a very special announcement one day in the Hindu, a short story contest organized by a British periodical by the name The Encounter. Of course, the encounter wasn't a known commodity among the Gemini literati. Of course, it is not something known among the Gemini studio um, uh, qualified people, uh, learned people. I wanted to get an idea of the periodical before I spent a considerable sum in postage and sending a manuscript to England. In those days, if you want to send an article to a newspaper in a foreign country, you have to spend a lot of money. It's very costly. It used to be very costly. Nowadays, all we do is just write an what do you call enclose it enclose your manuscript in an email and send it to the other part of the world. In those days, that was not the case. You need to send it by post, and it took a long time and a lot of expenditure in order to send articles that you want to get published in foreign magazines. So here it's not for publication, here it is for a competition. So he thought, before I send this to that magazine, let me see what this magazine is all about, and therefore whether it is worth sending. Okay. In those days, British Council Library, if you have the British Council Library in Chennai, even today, it's there in the same place. Those days, the way of entering it was not so easy. It looks like there is a lane, and after that lane, there is, let's say, what do you call, some checkpost or something like that. You need to say why you're coming, because that's where also the British consulate is. So in those days, that was where the British consulate also was. It looks like it was very difficult to enter the British Council Library. The British Council Library had an entrance with a long winded signboards and notices to make you feel you are making a sneaking into forbidden area. And there were copies of the encounter lying about in various degrees of freshness. Once he entered the library, he found this copy there, lying about in various degrees of freshness. Some were fresh, some were not so fresh, some were even less fresh, some were old, almost untouched by readers. Looks like nobody's been reading them. It's just lying on the table. When I read the editor's name, I heard a bell ringing in my sunken heart. Now, what he means by this is he was reminded of something. And this was a kind of device that movie theaters, movie people used to use in order to talk about being reminded of something, an actual bell ringing. It was the poet who visited the Gemini studios. Oh, it was this same person who had come and given a speech which nobody could understand, of which he felt sorry. I felt like I had found a long lost brother. This is another device used in movies in order to attract uh, a good audience, right? This was a technique used at that time. Okay, I felt like I had found a long lost brother, and I sang as I sealed the envelope and wrote out his address. And I actually sang with happiness. Now, the singing is not just singing, it's a kind of like remembering something song, right? Let me explain that to you. I felt that he too would be singing the same song at the same time. This is a reference to the movie industry where if you there is one scene where Rajinikanth is looking around, looking for his sister, or I don't know, girlfriend, and who's been kidnapped, and he goes singing, "Oh Priya, oh Priya." He keeps on singing, and Priya hears it, and probably, or whoever it is, the other person hears it. She sings back, and he knows, okay, this is the same person. That's how long lost brothers found each other in Indian cinema, right? I felt that that he too would be singing the same song at the same time. Long lost brothers of Indian films discovered each other by singing the same song in the first reel and the final reel of the film. So that's when the discovery was made that this is actually my brother. Stephen Spender, that was the person. And you see the article there. Okay, what's it written about Stephen Spender? An English poet, essayist who concentrated on themes of social injustice. Okay, uh, concentrated on themes of social injustice and class struggle. If you look at the old version of Flamingo, published a few years ago, you will find this one such a poem written by this poet, Stephen Spender. It's called An Elementary School Classroom in Islam, right? So this is about social injustice and class struggle. He generally wrote about these things: social injustice and class struggle. And class struggle refers to upper class, lower class, middle class. Okay, just it's very similar to our caste system in India. Okay, except that this is connected, class is connected more with money, who the haves and the have nots, right? Stephen Spender, that was the name. Stephen, that was his name. Okay, so that's how he goes to explain um, the situation uh, that he found himself into. That is, when he found that magazine, The Encounter, he realized it's Stephen Spender who came and talked in Gemini Studios. It's the same Stephen Spender, right? In that case, then this is okay. It's okay to send this this write up, this manuscript, to this magazine. Now he wants to make one or two comments about this. Okay, let's see what comments he has to make. And years later, when I was out of Gemini Studios, I had much time but not much money. Anything at a reduced price attracted my attention. On the footpath in front of Madras Mount Road Post Office, now that's where it's called the Shanti Theatre stop, the bus stop called as Shanti Theatre stop. Okay, uh, and the platform usually had books, second-hand books that you could buy. Some of them could be new books, but usually second-hand books. Okay, people used to sell to these bookmakers, these booksellers who were on the platform. In those days, lots of people bought from the second-hand platform shops. So he happened to see this magazine there. Okay, on the footpath in front of Madras Mount Road Post Office, there was a pile of brand new books for 50 paise each, at a very throwaway price, 50 paise each. Okay, there was a pile of them. Actually, they were copies of the same book. It's actually the same book. Okay, in multiple copies. An elegant paperback of American origin. It was an elegant paperback. It looked very stylish, and it was American. Special, what's written on top of that? Special low price student edition. I remember during my childhood days, during the 70s and the 80s, and that Russia was known for very cheap publication. They used to give books at very cheap rates. Okay, special low priced student edition, and this is the edition that he's talking about. Special low priced student edition in connection with the 50th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. I paid 50 paise and I picked up a copy of the book, The God That Failed. So what is the book? It was not The Encounter as I thought it might have been. It was The God That Failed. The name of the book is The God That Failed. Okay, 6 men of letters in 6 separate essays described their journey into communism and their disillusioned return. It was about 6 opinions, 6 different people expressing their opinion about communism after having a taste of it. Okay, so they were critically analyzing communism. Okay, and they were all famous people who were very famous for their writing at that time. Their journeys into communism and their disillusioned return. So they found communism not up to the mark as a philosophy, and they gave it up. Now, who are these six people? You find the, what do you call it, first name, Andre Gide. I do not know whether I'm pronouncing it rightly. And you see a note on him. Who is this man? A French writer, humanist, moralist, received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1947. This is one of the famous writers of that time, an international writer. Richard Wright was this man, an American writer known for his novel Native Son and his autobiography Black Boy. He's a black man. So he has written his autobiography and named it Black Boy. Okay, that is Richard Wright. Ignazio Silone. Who is this man? An Italian writer who was a founder member of the Italian Communist Party in 1921, which means the founder of the Italian Communist Party gave up communism and is known for the book The God That Failed, authored by him. Okay, so he wrote the book The God That Failed, called the what do you call The God That Failed. Right now, there is a reference to The God That Failed. Probably this reference is to what is written by the Italian writer Ignazio Silone, right? And this book that he has picked up from the platform has the same title but a different subtitle. And this different subtitle is what do you call? Here it's given that their journeys into communism and their dissolution return. So there are two books mentioned here. Okay, authored by him. Okay, now let's see who's the next person. Arthur Koestler. Who's this? An Hungarian-born British novelist known for his novel Darkness at Noon. Right? He also tried. All these people tried communism. And then Louis Fisher. I can remember this man. You'll see him in one of the lessons in the text, which is called as Indigo. Right? Indigo is taken from the book written by him. Okay, who's this person? Let's see who he is. What do you call? Note number 10. A well-known American journalist and a writer of Mahatma Gandhi's biography entitled The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. That is the name of the book. And that's where Indigo has been taken from. The Oscar-winning film Gandhi is based on this biographical account. Okay, and then Stephen Spender, one among them. Stephen Spender, suddenly the book assumed tremendous significance. Stephen Spender, the poet who had visited Gemini Studios. In a moment, I felt a dark chamber in my mind lit up by a hazy illumination. I was not able to clearly see, but I was able to see something. There's a clue here. The reaction to Stephen Spender at Gemini Studio was no longer a mystery. What was that hazy illumination? He knew why people did not understand, why he could not understand what the speech was all about. The boss of the Gemini Studios may not have much to do with Stephen Spender's poetry, but not with his God that failed. So the clarity that he has now got is not only that Stephen Spender is a communist, but also it is connected with the God of S.S. Vasan, right? The boss of Gemini Studio may not have much to do with Stephen Spender's poetry, but not with, that means he was connected with his God that failed. Which God is that? Communism, right? Communism that failed. So he was trying to say that Stephen Spender and S.S. Vasan have that common idea, and that common idea is communism is something we wanted to try and see. We tried, we found it wanting, and therefore we disillusioned, returned. With dissolution, we returned. Okay, so that's what is stated there. The rest and later.